Will, I'm going to give us a 3, 2, 1,
Okay.
and you're going to do the opening.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Mixing it up. I don't know.
Okay, sure.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. This podcast explores leadership traits under stress with a special guest each week. We use a simple and accurate OAD assessment to identify key personality traits or superpowers, as well as the shadow side, kryptonite traits that appear when we're under stress. As always, we'll have some pod banter, shameless plugging, and we'll even let our guests talk for a bit. Of course, no humble brags. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our podcast today. I'm Will Barfield. I'm doing the intro because John wanted to mix it up, didn't you, John?
I did. How's it feel?
Oh, unnatural. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to try and kick it off. How do you like the green floaty colors behind my head?
I think you look better. I think your headset does not pixelate out. I mean, it's still attached to your big pumpkin head, but it. Sorry.
Look, pumpkins are my wife's favorite.
Yes.
She loves fall and autumn, so she'll enjoy that reference.
I will say you look nice and clear on your brick wall. So good for you. We're up in the production value.
So, you and I have been talking recently in our banter about the fact that I needed a green screen because my headphones would disappear. And so I got one of those that attaches to the back of your chair. It's really cool. And it just secures and then throws a circular green screen up behind you. So happy to have that today.
A must-have for today's modern podcaster.
Well, yeah, and we've got we got Mark here, and I wanted to make a really good first impression on him as well. So I wanted to be really tight today. I showered, put on this nice light blue golf shirt, and I'm ready. Any other banter? You mentioned your hat. Do you want to point that out?
I do. So Peloton, everyone knows I'm a fanboy. We are going to make a full-fledged, half-assed, I'll say it, attempt to get them to be a sponsor. So I figure I got to wear the hat.
Yeah.
And it's making my head itchy. And so my goal of not touching my face during the podcast,
it's not going to happen.
It's no, but I got the big hands on. So if I do, I'm going to draw attention to myself.
Well, there's evidence that it happened. Well, Peloton might listen. I mean, I saw that picture of you in New York where you went to visit Peloton.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So maybe we should do a graphic where you're like on the bike or.
Yeah. I did a 60-minute ride last night.
At the very least, they should send you a bigger hat.
Or a smaller
less itchy hat.
Or a less itchy one.
So, what other banter do you have, Will, or do I?
We just did, didn't we? Mark, was I here? Wasn't that banter?
No, but do you have any more?
Oh no, I got nothing left in my bag.
Banter to me.
I didn't even know I was kicking the show off, so I definitely didn't for a banter.
Right. Well, I can check off Peloton. Thank you for using it up. And green screen.
Yeah.
So that gave us like 4 weeks worth of content. So good for you. And then I want to say 2 things about the pod. Then we'll get into it with our friend Mark. One is our pod status is kind of interesting. We record every week, and we are booked through August, where we're going to take a recording break, and we already have guests lined up for after Labor Day. So Willbot, I think, or Will Barrow, as I like to call you, I think we're onto something here. And so I think it's not too early to announce that this fall we're going to host the Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield live event.
Which arena?
So
how many seats?
We will have 4 months or so to get people to commit to attending. It'll be virtual, but we'll all be doing it live. We'll record live so people can hear us. Should I introduce our guest?
I would love that.
Okay. First, we have to introduce us. Since we're reversing things.
I'm Will Barfield.
I'm John Lane.
And we are
a work in progress. Always. Yeah. And our special guest, Today is my old friend, your new friend, Mark Pilipczuk. Mark, how are you?
Hey guys, good afternoon. I'm doing great. The sun's coming out and it's getting warm.
Where are you calling
Makes
from?
me happy. I am in Centerville, Virginia, just outside of DC.
I think a lot of the Civil War took place near there. Is that true?
It did indeed. I think we were talking a little bit earlier. There's that old Confederate rail.
Breaking the fourth wall. This is a professional operation.
I've seen your podcast.
And you still agreed.
Wow.
And you still agreed.
And I still agreed to show
up.
up.
That was a nice jab. There's some broken ribs from that one.
Tell our listener a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I call myself a marketer. My primary training is as a direct response marketer, i.e. junk mail. That's what I started doing in the early 90s. I've been CMO of two different companies, B2B and B2C companies. I've done everything from buying media to acquiring customers, working in continuity businesses like AOL, Sling TV, Pandora, the music company, not the jewelry company. I sometimes have to correct people. I've been the VP of Marketing of World Wildlife Fund here in the United States. I've worked in the nonprofit world as well. And I've done sort of everything that revolves around getting people to yes, getting customers to buy your products, buy more of them, and buy them more frequently. So that's what I do.
Can I ask a statistical question, Mark, before we leave this page?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Since you're in it, 90s direct mail response percentage. What's a really good single digit response rate to see, or maybe I'm wrong by thinking it was singles. I got like low single digits in my head, like 2%, 3% or something.
That was the stereotypical number back in those days. It was 2% response. I've run campaigns where I was getting 14 and 15% response, which is the highest number. So we fundamentally believe that we could control our response rate with the offer and with the price and the traditional marketing mix. So we would actually adjust our response rate. When our response rate was very high, our back end performance was relatively poor, and vice versa. So we would always balancing response rate and back end retention to maximize for profit. And that was the objective function we were always solving for.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. No, thank you for that.
So. Yeah, it's. I would say that if you're doing a good job, you could probably do better than 2% now, because back in those days we were getting, I think, 2,800 to 3,000 pieces of mail in an average household's mailbox on an annual basis, and now that number is, I don't know what it is, but I know it's fallen off the cliff. So if you decide to use that medium, and if it works for your business, and it might not, you could do, I think, really well. And I've also seen some atrocious direct mail. All of us old junk mail guys are either dead or retired.
Yeah, so you could go for share of mailbox. Hey, how are we talking about direct mail instead of about Mark's inner psyche?
We're getting to that.
I'm trying to put it off.
We're gonna bury your soul.
Well, Mark, we're thrilled to have you on. Let me just grab the wheel for a minute, Will. So everyone knows on this podcast, we talk about leadership traits under stress. Where we get those leadership traits is from our partner, OAD. We run the personality assessment, and that produces some traits, and we use those traits to convert them into superpowers and kryptonite. And let us present our friend Mark. Will?
Yes,
I'm going to ask a question.
Yeah, so Mark, you're a very experienced and complex person, and yet how does it feel to be reduced to a two-dimensional table here?
Well, the trick question is, I actually love it, both because I'm an analytical person, but also because I've been using these type of things since about 1991, and very other models, but very similar. So I'm very comfortable with this, and to me, it makes me actually feel kind of good, because I can take a snapshot at this and I can understand a little bit about not only myself, but if this was somebody else, a little bit about them without having to spend a lot of time getting to know them. And to me, it's useful. So I really enjoy this type of thing.
Well, and you've already seen your readout, and John's going to walk you through that. And you did some homework to get ready for today's show. since you've been using these things in different ones, different capacities since '91, quick question: what did you think about the comparison of the speed and ease of this one balanced against the accuracy?
This is so quick. I mean, I don't know what it took me, 5 minutes maybe
Yeah.
to fill out the profile. And to me, it's highly accurate. And I've read the OAD assessment, a couple times, and to me, it is incredibly spot on. And that's the thing I like about it the most is within 4 or 5 minutes, you can get some useful information. And if you get somebody to kind of help you understand it, you can break it down into strengths and weaknesses or kryptonite and superpowers or whatever kind of phrases you want to use. And you can actually use it immediately within minutes of getting the information. You can actually be deriving value from it. And that's what I love about this type of thing. And it's empirically proven to be accurate. And that's the important thing too. And because it's not nonsense, it actually works. And that's really interesting.
Yeah, the science behind it is strong. And Will and I will be announcing a more formal approach to workshops, but they're all about leaders and their teams identifying and optimizing their personality traits to reduce friction and improve success, right? A team can only work together well if they know where they're coming from. And using OAD and some of the work we do will help that process. All right, commercial message over. Let's break this down. So Mark is what we call a technical specialist, and he's in what we call the expert quadrant, and I'll break that down in a second. But when we look at the way we read OAD assessments is we connect the 4 dots and we look at it holistically, and then we break down the piece parts. We won't go into a full readout, but Mark's most dominant trait is detail orientation, which means things like attention to detail, but also things like structure and I lost that word right out of my head. Compliant. So if something's due at 5 o'clock, Mark has it done at 4. He's also assertive, so you can see that as the second one. He is not particularly extroverted, which doesn't necessarily mean the introvert-extrovert paradigm for OAD. It also takes into account things like communication style, so whether he is more technical communication style versus more of a selling communication style. And then finally, you see that P hanging out there, and that P means it's more subordinate than the average, which means that Mark operates with a great deal of urgency. So get something done right, but get it done quick, I think is what Mark would say. And then I mentioned the expert. So what we say is that Mark is a technically oriented specialist, and I won't go into any more about that. But if you know Mark, I think you couldn't help but agree with this, that he is direct with high knowledge. And to me, that says if Mark isn't an expert on the subject you're talking about, come back in a week and he will be. So that's our friend Mark. So
yeah, you often reference John here too, and really well and accurately about the people in this section of the matrix.
Yes,
it really matters to them, not just that the work gets done right, but how it gets done. That's very important.
Your work. Yeah, that's right. So Mark, if someone was reporting to you and they said, I got a 10% response rate. Okay. What else? What went into it?
Well, the first thing is even in the good old days, when we've seen those high responses, somebody told me 10% response rate, I'd say, I think your numbers are wrong.
Yeah,
that's right. And
I think you need to relook at it, because I've seen the numbers.
One of the attributes of a technically oriented specialist is that they begin thinking about a subject from a perspective of skepticism. And then they ask to see the data or get the data themselves. And then either they remain skeptical or they move towards believing it, but they start out with show me. So, all right. Well, that is how we think about all technical specialists. And now, Will, why don't you describe the generic concept and then drill in a little bit?
Will do. So we won't spend too much time on these particular generic slides, Mark. We're going to single click on an item in here. For those who get the result of a technical specialist in the expert quadrant, these are the generic superpowers that are typically associated with that profile. Is there one from this group that really yells louder at you than the others, or that you want to point out as you would definitely say that's a key trait of mine?
I would say the straightforwardness is probably the most key trait, and it's because, to me anyway, it's faster that way.
Yeah.
To just get the information out, have a discussion about the facts, and then move forward to it. Or look, if something's not working, it's not working. Let's figure out a way to fix it. And it's not anybody's fault. I'm not worried about the blame game. I'm just worried about, like, if we're supposed to be getting a 10% response rate and we're getting 3%, that means something's wrong. We need to get it back towards 10%. Well, let's start working on that if we can. And that is something that I think is useful, because it cuts through the, I got to make John feel good, or whatever. It's fine. We're not blaming John about the response rate being 3%. Maybe there's a technical glitch or something. Let's figure it out, and then let's get there, and let's not worry about it, as opposed to, being self-conscious about things, or taking things too personally. It is what it is. You'll hear me say that a lot.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So shifting from something that you pick as a key superpower, now, as we know, when stress is up or things get challenging, our superpowers can invert and become our weaknesses and our kryptonite, and lead to issues as leaders. Which one of these on the generic page speaks to you most?
Yeah, it's probably the impatience, too impatient or driving. And it's funny, because people that know me, work with me for a while, particularly when we're in the office together, can actually see each other. They can tell when I'm starting to get impatient, because my leg starts going. My knee starts bobbing up and down, because what's happening is, in my head, that's my tell. So if you ever see me in poker and my knee's going, don't call me. I got something good. Yeah. So it's because I'm already starting to think about the next thing. Okay, I think we know the answer to that question. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next one. Let's get through this problem as fast as possible. So you'll see the knee going. And where it manifests itself sometimes is in the questioning. So as we're trying to solve a problem, or let's phrase it positively, take advantage of something that we saw that was a really good test result. It's like, how quick can we take advantage of that thing? How quick can we take this thing to market faster? And you'll just see that, I'll start to drive. And of course, it takes a while to do things, to buy the media, to get the creative together, to do, whatever you have to do. It takes, a certain amount of time. You can't, spend, $10 million of media tomorrow, at least intelligently. So, but I want to, right? Like, we know what the answer is. And so that what happens is, it starts to push people, and you can see they start to get troubled by it. How are we going to get all this stuff done? There's only 8 hours in a day, right, that we can work. And, you just said, let's do 16 hours of stuff for the next 2 weeks, 6 days a week. That's just not a reasonable expectation. And I know that. And so when I look down, I see my knee go, and I say, you know what? I'm probably pushing a little bit too hard on this, and maybe I need to dial it back a notch.
Awesome.
All right. Well, this is your superpowers and kryptonite together, but you were kind enough to put together your own thoughts of your leadership superpower moments. And I will say you get an A for effort for giving us the most bullets. The guy, Jared, last week, this will already have run, he gave me one word for each bullet and then one for each side. So not an expert. This is an expert. This is an expert delivered to us. So thank you for that.
So here we are. We're looking at your own reflections of your superpowers. As a leader, whether you're leading, as you said, 3 digits worth of people, or just yourself or one initiative or the company. Um, you know, we can spend a little bit of time digging into these here, but you talk through what you want to from these sections. Why did you select to share these notes with us about your personal strengths as a leader?
Well, I think it's the second one that sort of, I think is the one that encompasses everything a little bit here. That's that simplification.
Yeah.
The things we do in business, most of them are actually relatively simple, or can be simplified and explained in an easier way. There's a lot of complications or there's a lot of complexity, excuse me, within the business. It's like, a lot of business is biology. It's a very complex thing. Humans make things complicated, or we tend to make things overly complicated. But if you can simplify what you're trying to do, whether that is selling hot dogs at a hot dog cart, getting subscriptions to Pandora, getting people to donate to World Wildlife Fund on a recurring basis, if you can break those down to the simplest component parts, 3 or 4 or 5 things, probably no more than that, and focus on those things, you can get a lot of stuff done very quickly, usually with good success. And you can also strip away the non-essential things that accrete around businesses, because humans like to make things, complex. I'm trying to think of a good example, but sometimes I'm noted for standing in office buildings and saying, see that guy down in the corner, and I point down to the hot dog vendor when I'm down in Manhattan on the corner. I said, do you know why that person is set up their cart on that corner? And people come up with all sorts of weird explanations. I say, because that's where the most foot traffic is, in that corner. And that person knows that when more people walk by their hot dog cart, the more likely they're going to sell the products that they have to sell. It doesn't take an MBA to figure that out. And that individual who runs that hot dog cart has simplified their business to the point where they know where they're going to maximize their amount of profit. And they don't do a lot of PowerPoint around it either. They count the money at the end of the day.
Hey, Mark, do you remember the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, where not Butch Cassidy, Bonnie and Clyde, when the reporter asks Clyde why they rob banks? He says, that's where the money is. That's where they keep the money.
That's where the money is.
Why do you sell hot dogs on this corner? Because this is where all the people who want to buy hot dogs.
That's where the people are. Why do you run the ad here? That's where the people are likely to respond and buy the products you have to sell. So that to me is really important. And if to break it down, get it as simplified as possible so that everybody can understand it, and then you can get everybody in the business rowing the boat in the same direction. They're not going off and freelancing a lot. They're focusing, here's the thing that I do to help response rate get better. Here's the thing that I do to help the back end retention get better. Here's a test that I can run to get the optimal trial pricing for the product, or the optimal recurring revenue price for the product. So, but if you're guessing and you're making it too complicated or too complex, excuse me, you're going to have too many things in the water at one time, and you're going to burn people out. And the nice thing about simple is it's easier to understand, it's easier to do, and it's easier to go home at the end of the day after a reasonable day. I don't think anybody should be working 20 hours a day. That's if you've got a business where it's so complicated, you got to run it 20 hours a day, I don't think you got a good business.
I want to touch that once before we move on to the next slide. In your history, in your work, when it comes to that point of simplification, which I agree with wholeheartedly, have you found it historically more challenging to get those above you to get on board with simplification, peers, leadership peers, or to send that message down? Where have you found the most challenge, and where have your superpower muscles been the most useful when it comes to that? Up, across, or down?
It's usually, unfortunately, up.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the more senior you get in a company, the more people like the trappings of being a senior leader. Lots of people coming to you, bringing you PowerPoint presentations and showing you lots of dashboards with lots of numbers. And John and I remember those in the days of of AOL. One of your past guests, Ken Rona, who is one of my favorite people of all time. He came in one time to one of our meetings, and he was the VP of analytics, and he said, "I'm going to give you one number, and I want you to make one decision." He was talking to the EVP and the other SVPs that reported to that person. And as opposed to this deck of 30, because he said, "You guys never use this anyway. Here's one thing that's really important. Make a decision and do it." And he said, "Then in 2 weeks when we have the next meeting, I'll bring you something else. And maybe I'll bring you two things because now you're capable of making decisions." And he really simplified stuff. I remember this. I remember the room I was in when he did this. It was brilliant. And he was so right. I was laughing my head off during the meeting. And it made it easy to take action.
Yeah.
And so, they're like, "Is this really this simple?" And I go, "Yeah, it is. Kind of."
Kryptonite John. Thank you, Mark. That's fun. All right. Yeah. Now, as fantastic as you are, do you sometimes feel stress or pressure or what have you, and your strengths become weaknesses, and you've noted them here in some detail. Anything here you want to pull out or run the risk of being questioned about?
I think it goes back to that faster thing. So when I start to get stressed and under stress, the way that it manifests itself is I start to get fast. Not only does my knee go, but my language begins to get faster. So I speak quickly as it is, unfortunately, and it is a flaw. But I start to get even faster, and I will notice myself. I'll start to cut people off before the end of their sentence, and that's not a great way to communicate. I'm guessing what the end of the sentence is going to be, and I might be right a lot of the time, but I'm not right all the time. And you don't get the interaction with people when you start to go like this and you start to move very, very quickly.
Yeah, they shut down.
They shut down. And as I would too, if somebody cuts me off, I'm going to shut down. And so when to overcome it, you have to listen and say, do I feel stressed? Are we not delivering the results we're supposed to deliver? Is something going wrong? Do we not have the right people in the room? And I've got to remind myself, okay, let's calm down. Let's not talk over people. Let's try to get let's try to let people be heard, because the solution's never with me. The solution is always with somebody else that notices the problem, but you got to let them speak. And so if I listen for it, I can cut it off and stop it from happening. But when I don't listen for it, and if I let myself get too stressed, that's where it starts to snowball. And then you have, the bad meeting. Nothing happened. People walk away stressed. They feel bad. Their boss or their peer, doesn't understand them. You can't have that outcome. That's not conducive to solving problems and creating profit.
No, and it speaks to your very high patience. I'm going to pick on that first bullet. When you have the P at where it is on your chart, that can tend to be, I want to own it. I could do it better, and you can sometimes struggle with delegation.
Right.
And so that's what you're, it's kind of what you're alerting, referencing there is, under stress, I can be very detailed. I can pull back from delegation. I can cut people off. I can press too hard, and I can just say, well, fine, just get out of my way. I'll do it. I know what you're thinking. Let me tell you what you're thinking.
Right.
And you're right.
And that doesn't work.
Your team.
Yeah, that doesn't work. And I've seen it, and I've made those mistakes in my career. So I freely admit it.
And I'll just pull this back up to hit on Will's point is somebody with a high D is somebody who is structured and hands-on. Nothing wrong with that. That is what it is. It makes part of what makes it a specialist. But when that lower P kicks in and you're stressing, then the tendency is, instead of being, compliant with the process, you take over and you just do it, and that literally never works. It literally never works.
Never does.
Yeah, thank you, John. I misspoke there. I meant high D, not high P. Not that the and all those points, by the way, are relative. Not like highs and lows are all relative to each other, but that detail orientation and that patience piece are what combined can lead to some of that for you. You've also pointed something out here that is and we'll finish with this on this page, a common theme that John and I are running into with Kryptonite for our leaders is wanting to help, inability to say no, and spreading too thin, overcommitting, and then serially either under delivering or just spreading yourself too thin. And when that happens, then that spreads over not only into the work product, but then it follows you home, and it impacts all other parts of your life.
Yeah.
So my wife Amy, who owns our company, has brought up to me after watching several of these. It seems like that seems to be a trait of leaders often, is that at this level, when you're running a company or owning a company, or you have that C next to your name, that saying no can be really super hard.
Right. And and I just get bored easy too. So if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I got this thing I'm working on and I could use your help," or whatever, and you go, "Wow, I've never done that before. That sounds pretty interesting. Let me see if I can help you out." And the next thing you know, you're sitting at your desk at 8 or 9 o'clock at night going, "Now I got to do my real work." Right?
So we'll carry that over. Yeah. So, this someone who has been through these types of assessments before, has tried several of them, and liked the results of these. Every time we take a look at ourselves, we learn something. Anything that came out of this experience with me and John lead up to today, plus this show, that you can apply to work, home, social. I need to be better about this, or I can improve there, or are you without flaw at this point in the podcast?
No, well, the one thing that I would say from a work perspective, it's and we just touched on a minute ago. It's saying no, right? It's not disrespectful to say, "Hey, John, I can't help you with this thing because I'm fully engaged with my day job."
Yeah.
I can say, "Look, I would love to help you, but I may only have time next week or next month, or when I get through this particular project," and that may not be okay. You might need help right now, and so maybe you can say, "Well, maybe so and so, who's an expert that can help you, maybe offer some suggestions, not to dump the work on somebody, but maybe to help that." And then the other thing that I've been doing is I've been studying a lot of Stoic literature and reading Marcus Aurelius now for the last 6 or 7 months, and a lot of it is don't worry about those things that you can't control. If somebody else is running a piece of business, they're in charge of it, they know what they're doing, obviously they've gotten into that position. Let them take care of that, take care of the thing that you have to do. And then when you do have that time, of course you can be generous and offer that time to other folks. But if you try to jam it all together, I'm going to fail at what I do, my people are going to fail at what they do. So that's not acceptable. And then the other person, I'm not going to be able to help them at all. And so they're going to struggle too. And so the whole thing is not going to work very well. So
everyone drowns.
Is the best thing you can do, right? Is to say, let me do what I need to do here. Let's get it done. And then when we have time, we'll go work on some other stuff, because there's lots of stuff to work on. There's no shortage of it. There's always interesting things.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're both glad you see the value of this. Speaking of value, I'd like to put our guests on the spot. Can you think of somebody who could handle the modern interrogative powers of Mr. Will Barfield?
You want me to say his name?
Yes.
Well, I know a guy by the name of Paresh, and he is one of these monster-wide people, in that he has a Bachelor of Science degree in engineering, an MBA from Harvard, and is a Kundalini certified Kundalini yoga instructor.
Wow.
So as both the the left and the right brain, or the analytical and the metaphysical, or whatever you want to call it, one person, really interesting person. And I would love to see what that profile looks like, because I don't know what it looks like, but it's got to be interesting, because
he spent
I don't know how you get that in one package.
Mark, he spent some time in AOL when we were there, right?
Doing some consulting work, because he's on consulting companies. He's an entrepreneur. He's raised money. He's worked in different places. Really kind of an interesting background. So if we can convince him to come on, I'd love to see the drawing.
That's
the
awesome.
shape is going to be. It's kind of interesting.
You say he's a true patriot, right? Birthday wise.
Yeah. He's actually funny because he's like a Yankee Doodle dandy. He was born on the 4th of July.
Nice.
So I believe the first in his family born in the United States. So much like myself, from an immigrant kind of a family.
Love to have him. Love to have your help with getting him on.
Love that. All right.
I will twist his arm.
Guys, it's hard to believe, Mark, we've been looking forward to this for so long, but it's time to say adieu. I'm John Lane.
I'm a sad Will Barfield.
I think we can say all three of us are
Yes.
a work in progress. Thank you.
Clearly.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Work in Progress is a podcast presentation of Slipshod Productions. Available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Executive produced and starring John Lane and Will Barfield. Talent booking, production, and editing by John Lane. Thanks for watching. See you next week.